Hi, it's me, Carrie B. I just wanted to talk to you today about the Stampin Blends Alcohol Markers that Stampin' Up! Makes. There's no reason to be scared of these. If you haven't used an alcohol marker before, I'm going to show you some really quick ways to use these. Come on, let's go. So the first thing you're going to do when you start working with an alcohol marker is you're going to cover your surface. They have a tendency to bleed through, and so it's really important to do that first. And not forget, because they really shine best when you can layer them up and work with them over a little bit of time. I created my own coloring page using a stamp set that we got at Onstage. When I'm going to start with alcohol markers, the first thing I do is I make myself a swatch. I take my Stampin' Blends and I just use the fine brush point, give it a try, maybe try them out. That's a little bit thicker brush point, and then I just sort of lay it next to the swipe that I make so that I have a color comparison chart. It really helps because a lot of times the caps don't match exactly, and this is true across all brands. This is not something that is like a poor design in Stampin' on Stampin' Up's part or anything like that. It just is kind of industry standard for these. Although I do have to say, Stampin' Blends do seem to get just about as close as you can compared to a lot of other brands. Some of the cheaper brands, maybe off brands that you might get, are challenging. A lot of people are more familiar with a Copic marker, the brand Copic or Copic. And you know what? I tested them, a lot of them together, and they work really well together because at their core, they're alcohol based. So I'm going to go ahead and supplement with some of the other brands that I have and show you what I mean as far as like blending them together. The best thing to do when you're starting off is to start with a cool tone like a gray or even a neutral tone like this really light tan. And the best thing you can do is go in and start shading in the darker areas, sort of the areas that are behind, maybe areas that you think would have a natural shadow to them. That's sort of the first step. Maybe, you know, there's sunlight coming through the window, so maybe you want to assume that there's shadow here, shadow on the dark side of the seat, maybe underneath her. You know, maybe the light is coming this way. Underneath, behind. Okay. And it's usually right here, you know, it's good for building confidence. You're like, you know what, that's not that bad. I can handle that. Then I start to go in with a little bit more intense colors. And this is where it gets scary, where you think, sometimes about partway through this process, I'm thinking, oh man, I really screwed up. But I start with the lighter color and I sort of go around the edges. Just around the edges. And again, this can seem really scary. Like, oh, I'm gonna mess it up. But it's okay, just keep going, just trust me. It's gonna be okay. You know, maybe I'm gonna take a more intense, bolder skin tone here. And I'm gonna go around the edges. I think in one version of this, I actually used a pink, like kind of an intense pink actually. I wanted her to have a little bit of pink to him. Maybe some of these shaded areas. All right, and you're gonna be looking at her skin and you're like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? That looks awful. Well, here's the trick. I don't have a blender pen for the Stampin' Blends, but I do have one in another brand, and it says blender usually, and it doesn't have any ink in it. It looks pink, but it's just the alcohol solution. I first heard that it's the blender. I thought, oh, that means it'll mix the colors together, but really it's more of a lifter, and you can go in and it will bleed through the colors together a little bit and lighten them, but really it's best for using in the highlight area. And the more you use it, it almost in some cases will erase it. And the other fun thing is you can see it kind of happens slowly with the stamped part. There might be a little bit of feathering that goes on. Bleeding's a terrible word. The feathering is a better word for it. And even like, watch me take this more intense blue from another brand. Scout just came in the room. Do you have any alcohol pen tips that you are interested in sharing today?
Alcohol tips? Like
alcohol pens? Yeah. So here I'm going to, again, going in. It seems real scary, right? Really, really strong. While the color is sort of wet, this is the best time to work this layering technique. And, you know, you can see kind of on the back where it's starting to push the color through. But this is the best time to work with this technique, in my opinion. The blender pen responds better to fresh ink, I have found. I don't think it's a deal breaker if it's dry, but it's just you're gonna get better results if you do it this way. And you can see it's almost like magic. It starts to just push that ink out. And even if it looks a little streaky, that's okay, because you can go in and you can use another color over the top, and you just keep blending it. Just keep blending it. And it will respond. At this point, it's still kind of wet, but that's okay. Scout, do you have some tips that you want to perpetrate upon the masses?
I like to color the lighter ones like this. And I like to color them not like inside where the shadow would be, because that's where we're going to put the shadow. So as you can see, I'm coloring these, and make sure not to color over the same spot, of course. So here we're going to go in with our darker piece, and it's this piece right here. It's the shorter tip one, and basically we're going to go in with this shadowy one because this is kind of like a ridge kind of thing. And then another thing I like doing is just making like a pattern for myself and then coloring in that pattern. Here we have our dress finished, and basically, as you can see, there's these little shadows right here. And I like to make those because they're just like little shadows on the skirt.
Like going back to the one I started, you can see it started to get a little blotchy, and that might freak some people out, but you can go back in with like this neutral tone, and you can add your shadows again. You can go back in and add another layer, and it'll help smooth it out. So it's nothing to be scared of, in my opinion. Like, I don't think that there's a wrong way to do it. It's just, you know, you're gonna get a feel for it. And you can see this one has already dried, so it's picking up the colors still. It's not preventing it from picking up the color. It's not like the paper is sealed after it dries, right, Scout? Like, you can continue to manipulate it.
Yeah.
And see, like, this gray is dry, but if I go back in on the pillow and I want it to stand out a little more, it'll darken it. It'll just layer up, kind of.
Yeah.
I think the best way to work with alcohol markers is to mix the media. I would recommend using a gel pen, or like I have Prismacolors, and adding another layer to it. And the thing I noticed was it started to sort of obscure the original stamped image. So that's where the gel pen comes in handy, is you can kind of retrace in some places to add highlights, and like the pocket. And it adds a really cool look to it. I think. That's the way I figured out to start working with it, that I enjoyed the end result. And it's okay to obscure some of these stamped lines because the stamped lines are like a coloring book, you know, they're just guides there. And what's nice about the Stampin' Pad is that it's water-based, so these are powerful enough that they sort of add a blurry effect in some way. If you get a lot of alcohol marker in the paper, it might blur some of this, but it almost gives it like a watercolor effect, and I really love that.
So the thing you can use for colored pencils is just a white colored pencil. So I have this one right here. And you can actually use this one with markers too. That's the cool thing about...
Is that like a charcoal, white charcoal?
It is like a white charcoal kind of.
Yeah.
And basically you can go in the marker and kind of like lighten up. So you can use this and you can go over it and it makes like a light kind of thing. Plus this is really good if you wanted to lighten up like this black part. If you wanted to lighten up that part, you can just make it gray with this. So as you can see here, we made these kind of gray lines. And so these are great.
Oh yeah, it lightens it up. Now what happens if you color over it again and you try to like do a like mixed media thing and layer it up? Does it?
So say I just wanted to, let's see what happens with that. So here we're using the 10 blue again. This is the exact same one I used for that. And so we're gonna color over this.
And I'm watercoloring with the Stampin' ink. And I want to see what happens if I put the Stampin' ink over the alcohol, what happens.
So as you can see, it kind of makes like, you probably can't see it on the camera, but it kind of makes like a little bit of a texture.
Like a cross hatching.
Yeah. So it adds, if you say you just wanted to make it one color, you didn't have to add this. It probably wouldn't be best if you didn't add this if you just wanted to make one color. But say you just wanted to make it a little bit more realistic, all you can do is color over it with that white charcoal thing, and then color over it again with the one of your medias. And
so let's recap a minute. These stamped images were totally dry when we started working. That's one thing to note. Second tip would be start light with lighter colors and then work darker. Third tip would be go all in one direction, just like you said, to start with the alcohol pens, go all in one direction or else it starts to overlap and look messy. I feel like it needs something like what you're doing or some other kind of manipulation in order to make it look more, I don't know, have a more of a sophisticated technique look. Like, you know, like you really know what you're working with. You know how to work with this medium. I really think the more you manipulate it, the better it ends up looking. That's my opinion. I like to have a very chunky layered look. But it's gonna take some practice. This is not the first time that we've colored using these, and I don't intend to stop. I intend to keep trying to find a technique that I really like. How about you, Scout?
Like my mom said right here, you have to get familiar with your alcohol markers. It might sound a little bit silly, but it's true. You
Sounds
have
kind of
to.
obvious, right?
Yeah.
But that's really the best thing you can do is just practice with them.
Yeah. You kind of have to practice. Basically, a way to think about alcohol markers is just like watercolor, but in a pen form. You can control it better. And that's why I like alcohol markers so much, is because they're just so deep in color.
There's a lot of pigment, huh?
Yeah.
So I was saying, like, before you came in, that I'm pretending like there's sunlight coming through this window. So I put shadows underneath the lady, and also underneath the pillow and underneath her feet. And then now you can see the effect here is that it looks lighter here. It looks a little lighter, like there's sunlight coming through. So that's really nice, I think. I think it's a good effect.
Yeah, because it makes it seem really realistic.
A little more realistic, huh?
But at the same time, it makes it look cartoony. A little bit cartoony, and it kind of
definitely
mixes
have a cartoony look. I would agree with you. And now, like, you know, here's the thing. I think that if people in like your age group that use Copic markers knew that these existed, that they would try them. I mean, that's just my opinion. I just don't think maybe people don't know that they exist. People in your age group don't know that they exist. Doesn't that seem true?
I think that's pretty much true. I got introduced to these Copic markers and these alcohol markers, and they were just really good because I never really liked painting and how I couldn't really control a brush. And with these, you can kind of paint with controlling the brush. And so I kind of just really like
a little more deliberate,
these.
huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus, you can actually go over them really easily with other colors. So if you ever make a mistake, you can just go over them. But
I really like mixing a lot of different media. I'm not one to just stick with one. I think it looks flat if you just stick with one thing. So I would suggest considering using like a paint marker, gel markers. Get, you know, maybe like a water-based marker like the Stampin' Up! Ones that they make. You know, there's just a lot of different options, and I'm sure if you're an artsy person, you already have something on hand that will mix well. But if I had to suggest, I would say cardstock. Definitely cardstock, because you can see it's coming through, really like bleeding through.
Yeah, it bleeds through.
Yeah, and that's why I said make sure you cover your work surface. So there you have it. My girl Friday Scout popped in and helped us out with some of her best practices for working with alcohol markers, and I tend to agree with her. She had some good wisdom. Good for an 11-year-old. So if you have any questions about anything you've seen in this video, comment below and I will be sure to answer you. Or you can contact me using the link in my description. So I hope you guys are having a great holiday season. Happy Thanksgiving, and we will be back after the holidays, after a short break for Thanksgiving. Enjoy your families, enjoy the weather, be safe, and God bless.